again, everybody. Welcome to Gamecock Central Radio. Emerson Phillips, joined by Gamecock Central columnist Scott Davis. Scott, maybe my all-time favorite column of yours on the website this week. The headline of your column is Avalanche of Emotion, a full day for you on Gamecock Football. Season opening Saturday, Scott, a trip to Cracker Barrel, Publix, and the Cobb County landfill. Tell us about
it. Just about every emotion experience you can go through. What a whirlwind. What a day Saturday, Emerson. I mean, my goodness, that was just a crazy 3 hours of Gamecock football, 3+ hours. A crazy couple of hours I had personally before that, and all of a sudden, we haven't been watching football for months on end. We've been waiting for it forever, and here we are at the end of the game with North Carolina State barreling towards the end zone to tie the game up. It really felt like there at the end that they were going to go ahead and put the football in the end zone. South Carolina was going to have to bring its exhausted defense back out there for overtime, and then it really didn't feel like a good situation to be in. And suddenly the ball's in the air, as I say in the column, and everything we've been waiting for is happening. But yes, it was a hectic morning for me. I got a new grill for my birthday a couple of weeks ago, and for reasons that only I can figure out myself with a long period of reflection, I waited until the morning of South Carolina's football game against NC State to kick off the 17th season to take my old grill to the county dump, put my new grill in its new place, get to the grocery store for supplies for the game, and I didn't get down to my chair to watch, my trusty football chair to watch South Carolina kick off the season until 1 minute before they were getting ready to kick that thing off. So it was a nerve-wracking Saturday.
Scott, we all deal with pregame jitters in different ways. Some folks turn to alcohol. You went the Cracker Barrel route. You got down on some Cracker Barrel yesterday morning.
Yeah, last year I found myself before South Carolina Vanderbilt in the opening weekend Thursday night game at a nearby Mellow Mushroom where I inhaled a couple of large pepperoni pizzas. And for this affair, a little bit earlier in the day, I found myself at a Cracker Barrel, knocked out a country fried platter there. Tons of food, tons of calories. I needed all the protein I could get to get through this thing. And you just forget about how agonizing it is to actually watch a football game from beginning to end, just the swirl of emotions. There's going to be a period during the game when it seems like all is lost and all hope is gone. There's going to be a period where you briefly feel like, hey, the Gamecocks may just run away with this thing and make it an easy Saturday for me. And, of course, that didn't end up happening. So really every emotion you want to experience in life, it can happen in the 3-hour span of the South Carolina football game.
So you took the old grill to the Cobb County dump yesterday, waited in line for some time there, it sounds like, went to Cracker Barrel, had a late break, brunch or lunch there, went to Publix to load up on big game fare, Brotz's big game fare in the Davis household. I enjoyed reading about that. And then there you are, Scott. You said you're in your chair in your den at 2:59, just a minute before the scheduled start of the ESPN broadcast of South Carolina, NC State, and football. I liked your line here, Scott. Football swept over you like an avalanche.
It does. If you ever watch footage of some of these nature programs where you see an avalanche happening, oftentimes, the day seems perfect out there, but just one little tweak in the weather happens, and all of a sudden the mountain's falling down on top of you. And that's exactly what it felt like. I was out there doing what would normally be a routine Saturday morning for me, running errands around our home here in Atlanta. And all of a sudden you are back immersed completely in the life or death craziness that is college football. It just totally jolts you out of your sleepy day-to-day routine, and especially to have a game like this as your opening game. I mean, if you're a Clemson fan, you watched your team just kind of cruise to a humdrum 56-3 win over Kent at home. No big deal there. For us, it was literally just a nail-biting experience from beginning to end. especially that ending was just agonizing. And to have that be your first exposure to college football since the end of the 2016 season, which truly seems like a century ago at this point, that will really splash some cold water on your face and wake you up and announce itself to you that football season is back.
Avalanche of Emotion is Scott Davis's new column that's up on GamecockCentral.com. We invite you to check it out. And if you're new to Scott's column, you get candor, you get self-effacing humor, and maybe a touch of neurosis as well. Scott, you've got 3 default settings when you're watching Gamecock football.
Yeah, I do. The first one is I really began a couple of years ago to try to remain more calm when I was watching the Gamecocks. I was definitely out of control, which I'll touch on in a minute, but so the first one is to totally appear calm on the outside, while, of course, on the inside, I'm going through a total whirlwind of emotion. And this is the one that feels completely hypocritical to me, because I'm showing the world a side that is absolutely not what's happening to me inside, but it's what I've got to do to kind of try to stay as a member of society and not scare away friends and family members. The second one is mostly the same as the first one, except occasionally you'll see some chinks in the armor, some cracks in the veneer as an outburst will pour out, maybe some sighing, some groaning, some yelling at the referees, or in yesterday's case, the announcers, which we'll get to. And the third setting is just complete and total lunacy, screaming, shouting, profanities, stalking around the house. I've even been known to walk outside and try to gather myself rather than actually watch the game. So that was the approach that I unfortunately took most of the time during my younger days, and I definitely needed to chill out, try to enjoy these things. Football's not here very often, so we need to enjoy the experience, and that's what I've been trying to do.
The Carolina game really was an emotional roller coaster ride to open the season, this win over NC State. And, Scott, you've got a new namesake for the game balls that you give out each week. You've been doing the column for a number of years here on Gamecock Central, and you give out game balls each week. And Pharaoh Cooper brought us the game balls several years ago, but a new namesake this year.
Yeah, it's got to go to Deebo Samuel. What an amazing Saturday he had. You don't want to say he single-handedly won the game for South Carolina, because there were quite a few contributors to the Gamecocks' emotional win yesterday. But he was such a huge part of that game. His big play ability, he's had that for, since he's been in a Gamecock uniform. But this was a day where really everything he brings to the table kind of crystallized, and you could really see what a special athlete and special talent he is. And he's a guy the Gamecocks tried to keep getting the ball to, maybe even to a fault at the end of the game. They just wanted to get it in his hands, and it makes sense. He starts the game off by returning a kickoff 97 yards, something South Carolina never seems to have success doing. And to do that as the very first play of the 2017 scrimmage, I mean, that was just like a lightning bolt to kick off the season. And from there, NC State never was able to gain a lead in this football game. They did tie it up several times, far too many times for my liking, and came very, very close to tying it up again at the end of the game. But because of that Deebo Samuel kickoff return, South Carolina was always at least very much alive and in control of this football game. He also made one of the most spectacular catches I've ever seen a Gamecock make, and I've been watching these guys for over 30 years, and there was a lot of praise for Jake Bentley on the throw on this touchdown play, and he deserves it, but it was really the catch by Deebo Samuel running across the entire field, reaching out with one hand, pulling the ball down, and scoring a touchdown. I've never seen anything quite like that.
Gamecock Central Radio, Emerson Phillips with our columnist Scott Davis. Avalanche of Emotion is on the site right now. We hope you'll check it out. And we also hope that you have downloaded the Gamecock Central Radio app. We've got this phone app that's on the App Store and on Google Play. It allows you to listen to our podcast on your mobile device. The app is free. The podcasts are free. Download the app today. Subscribe to our podcast. Search for Gamecock Central Radio on iTunes, SoundCloud, and other popular services, or just visit radio.GamecockCentral.com. Also want to tell you about the new Gamecock Central hotline that we've got. Hope you checked out the Gamecock Central Game Day podcast that we ran on Saturday, and we're going to be running this Game Day podcast all season long. South Carolina's got Missouri coming up on Saturday, and we will have another Game Day podcast coming out for you this weekend. If you want to be a part of the Game Day podcast, you can call the Gamecock Central hotline. You'll be prompted to leave a voice message. Leave a question for Wes Mitchell about Gamecock football. He'll answer it on our next Game Day podcast. The Gamecock Central hotline number is 803-497-9058. It's 803-497-9058. Call the Gamecock Central hotline 24/7. You can call any time of day, leave a voice message, and Wes Mitchell will answer your question on the next Gamecock Central Game Day podcast. Scott, big win for the Gamecocks here, a 5-point underdog South Carolina was coming into this game against NC State, and big win like this means that we had game balls outnumbering deflated balls 6-3. I thought that was good, and I remember a couple of years ago, 2015, when the Gamecocks went 3-9, we had a week where there were no game balls. It was nothing but deflated balls. So game balls outnumbered deflated balls 6-3 this week.
Yeah, there were a couple of all deflated ball columns. Those are always depressing to write and to talk about, but this was fun yesterday. You know, one thing I meant to mention in the column, you heard it. If you heard it once, you heard it 17,000 times yesterday from the ESPN announcers that, boy, this NC State team could be a dark horse in the ACC this year. We heard that over and over again. I think that's warranted, as much as I like to make fun of it. They have some potent weapons on offense. They have a stout defensive line and a lot of good athletes. They're an experienced team. Dave Doran's been coaching that team for a few years now, so they've got everything kind of in place to make at least a run at decency in the ACC. It's a neutral site game in the state of North Carolina, and no matter what you think about it, South Carolina was deemed to be a 5-point underdog in this football game. And so that's why one of the game balls I gave out was to any fan who, like I did, just enjoyed this win and took it for what it was. Yes, there were some disappointing things to see in this game. The defense struggled mightily at times, and that's an understatement. You know, that unit's going to have to perform better than that for the Gamecocks to have more than just another mediocre season. But there were also so many positives to take away when you consider that it was week one. It was a Gamecock team with quite a few question marks coming into the season against an experienced team that was considered by many, rightly or wrongly, to be one that has a chance to make some noise in the ACC this year. And so, along with Deebo Samuel, you know, you look at the performance of Jake Bentley, who, as I acknowledge in the column, you know, was not lights out perfect by any stretch of the imagination yesterday, but for a true sophomore who's only playing in, I think, his 8th game in college as South Carolina's quarterback, there were just a few flashes that really show you the potential of how special he can be. I mentioned that throw to Deebo Samuel a minute ago. There were also some Connor Shaw-like just escapes from certain death that he had. There were 2 third downs and long, and he dropped back to pass. The pocket collapsed almost immediately after he hiked the football. It appeared that he was about to get swarmed by 2 or 3 Wolfpack defenders, and somehow he squirts out of there and is able to pick up some first downs. And he showed a mobility yesterday that I don't think anybody was expecting to see from him. I don't think anybody's ever going to confuse him with Michael Vick or somebody like that who's going to run the football a lot, but he can move around in the pocket, keep plays alive, he can throw on the run. And so, yeah, he had a little bit of a disappointing second half. You would have loved to have seen the Gamecock offense just go out there and take over the game and say, you know what, we're just going to go ahead and win this game right now and put it out of reach, and they didn't do it. But there were enough good things from him that you have to be excited about him going forward.
Former Alabama quarterback Greg McElroy was the color commentator on the ESPN TV broadcast yesterday, Scott, and I thought it was very fitting that he got a deflated ball. Scott, is it just my imagination, or did it feel like McElroy had NC State -5?
It really did, and I want to say from the beginning, I actually like Greg McElroy. I think he does good work on the SEC network. I've listened to him announce games before and been happy with his work, but he predicted South Carolina to go 4-8 this season, and look, that's not shocking. I'm not mad at anybody for doing that, but once the game happened and reality was unfolding and preseason predictions had fallen by the wayside, I felt like it was time at that point to just call the game as it was actually happening, and instead it really did feel like he was stubbornly kind of clinging to this notion that South Carolina needed to be losing this football game, and you can certainly argue that they possibly should have lost that game. But the bottom line is they either led or were tied the entire football game. It just didn't seem like that was being reflected in the way the game was called, and particularly one thing he did, and I've talked about this in the column before, and I like to talk about announcers because it's the way in 2017 that the vast majority of fans experience a football game, so it's worth talking about. It just drives me insane when an announcer, right in the immediate aftermath of a play, will announce his opinion about what just happened. And then, as replays show that what he just said is not actually what happened, or that the replays just simply can't confirm one way or the other exactly what did happen, that they continue to do battle for their original opinion regardless of any and all evidence to the contrary. And that happened repeatedly yesterday, especially at the end of the game. There were a couple of calls that simply just weren't obvious either way, and he just kept riding for his original opinion over and over and over again, to the point that I actually muted the television, which is something I never, ever have done when watching South Carolina. As much as I complain about announcers, I've never actually taken the step of muting the television. But it really was something that lessened my enjoyment for the game, and I think that's all you hope for from an announcing team, is that they make you more excited about what you're watching. They enhance your experience, and that just simply didn't happen yesterday.
McElroy's commentary, you said, nearly ruined the entire experience for you, and I felt the same way, Scott. I imagine a lot of folks listening today may concur. So, Scott, one more line from your column this week, Avalanche of Emotion. It's up on GamecockCentral.com right now. You said that this is why we wait all year for football. It blows into our lives, takes over, and all we can do is kneel and appreciate the raw power of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's all about. I mean, like I said, one minute I'm at Publix, I'm, looking at what kind of, frozen garlic bread I want to buy, and the next minute, I'm literally standing in front of my television, about to break in half because I'm so emotional about what I'm watching there at the end of that football game. And so the kind of everyday sleepiness of our lives is just completely overwhelmed and overpowered by football. That's what makes it so special. I mentioned in the column that I wrote earlier before the season started that we talked about last time that football has that ability to kind of break through the sleepiness of our everyday routine. And because it's scarce, because it's just not here very often, when it is here, it's just so overwhelming and overpowering. And for that experience to be our first game of the 2017 season, it's just like a punch in the face to let you know this is what it's like to watch football, and this is what it's going to be like for another 11 games this season. So you better wake up and get ready. And that's what I love about it.
I think it's going to be a fun ride this year, Scott.
That's why, that whole experience was so exhilarating yesterday. The Gamecock defense kind of reverting back to some habits of Gamecock yesteryear where it's playing soft coverage, hanging back, allowing those short 4, 5, 6 yard passes. It seemed like, just watching the game, I haven't looked at the stats, but it just seemed like watching it that NC State had an inordinate amount of 3rd and 4s, 3rd and 5s, 3rd and 6s, kind of intermediate third downs that they converted repeatedly simply by having a guy take 3 steps, turn around, and catch the football. South Carolina, listen, that's something that has plagued South Carolina fans for about as long as I can remember. Fans can't stand watching that kind of coverage. And I understand, as I write in the column, why it's done. I completely get it on a rational level. It's frustrating to watch as a fan. There's no other way to say it. So South Carolina's defense has got to get better. There's plenty to work on offense as well. Gamecocks really struggled to run the football yesterday. I know NC State has a stout defensive line, as I mentioned earlier, but they could not get much going there. But all things considered, to win a game in those circumstances at a neutral site against a very good opponent, when it's the first game of the season and you've got a pretty young, inexperienced, unheralded team, I thought that was a great way to kick off the season. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next.
The Gamecocks with a big win, 35-28 over NC State in the season opener this weekend. And, Scott, it blows my mind how the media darlings in recent years, it seems, have been Tobacco Road schools. You know, it's North Carolina a few years, and this year it was NC State. And the Gamecocks have repeatedly dispatched of both of them in season openers. South Carolina has not lost to either team from Tobacco Road, NC State, or North Carolina since 1999.
There's no doubt it's always fun to beat those North Carolina teams. I don't know why. It just is.
Hey, Scott, great work this week, man. I enjoy your column. I read it every week, and I hope our listeners today will do it all season long. So we'll be back next week to talk about the Missouri game. Thanks very much, Scott.
Thank you, Emerson. Talk to you next week.
That's Scott Davis, SCD on fire on Twitter if you want to follow Scott. And I'm Emerson Phillips. Thanks for being with us on Gamecock Central Radio.